All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive cosmic shift in how we actually understand ourselves. We tend to take our modern concepts of human rights and personal worth completely for granted, right? We just assume they've kind of always been there, but the source material we're looking at today throws a major curveball. It argues that this inherent value of the human person is not some historical default setting. Actually, it's the direct result of one radical, world-altering concept, the Incarnation.
Picture this. It's ancient Greece, and the philosopher Diogenes is walking through a packed marketplace in broad daylight, holding a lit lantern. Naturally, people ask him what on earth he's doing. His response? I am looking for a human. And by that, he didn't mean he was lost. He meant that in all those bustling crowds, he didn't see true humans. He just saw creatures driven by base desires. People acting like greedy bears, lustful horses, or sly foxes. He was literally shining a light on a profound sickness in the ancient human condition, making the point that we desperately needed a true, uncorrupted prototype of what a human being was actually meant to be.
So, this brings us to a really critical question for our analysis. Where does our concept of human dignity actually come from? It totally challenges the modern assumption that human rights just sort of naturally exist out of thin air. We love to think that recognizing the immense value of every individual is just the natural evolution of human progress. But our sources argue that historically, that's just not true. For the vast majority of human history, the idea that every single person has immense, untouchable dignity would have sounded completely absurd. So where did this revolutionary idea actually start?
Section 1. The Paradox of Dignity, a worldview clash. To understand this, we really need to look at what the world was like before this massive worldview clash changed everything. In the ancient pagan worldview, human beings, especially the vulnerable, like the weak, the poor, or the young, were essentially viewed as dust, just dirt, basically a disposable resource for the strong. Take the ancient Roman paterfamilias, the head of the household. This guy had absolute legal power, literally the power of life and death over his kids. If a baby was born weak, or honestly just unwanted, they were routinely discarded. No second thoughts. Contrast that with the Christian worldview that eventually emerged, proposing this earth-shattering idea. Man is not dust, but a vessel designed to hold the divine. That single revolutionary idea restored absolute dignity to every single person, regardless of how useful they were to society.
But, here's where we hit a fascinating snag, the modern secular paradox. Today's society absolutely wants the joy and protection of human rights, which is great, but it largely ignores or completely rejects the historical and theological source of that dignity. And the sources argue this is a pretty dangerous game. By detaching human value from its root, we risk sliding right back into a system where humans are, once again, treated as mere resources or cogs in a machine. It's kind of like Franz Kafka's famous story, The Metamorphosis. You know the one, a guy wakes up as a giant insect but keeps his human mind. It's a terrifying symbol of a world that strips away inherent human worth, basically leaving us as nothing more than bugs to be stepped on.
Section 2. Cosmic Therapy, a Radical Intervention. So how did this massive philosophical shift actually happen? That brings us to the Incarnation, not just as a doctrine but as a radical medical intervention.
To the ancient Greeks and Romans, the idea of a supreme God taking on dirty, vulnerable, bleeding human flesh? Absolutely offensive. If a god appeared human, it was assumed to be a temporary masquerade, just a disguise. But here, the Incarnation is defined as something much deeper, a necessary, radical medical intervention for a diseased world. It's cosmic therapy. The divine didn't just slap on a human mask. The divine took on the absolute entirety of fallen human nature, including all of its vulnerabilities and indignities, specifically to heal it from the inside out.
This concept is brilliantly summed up by Gregory the theologian. He said, "What is not assumed is not healed." Think of it like a doctor who has to completely expose themselves to a virus to synthesize the perfect antibody. To actually cure the human condition, every single aspect of the human experience, the pain, the extreme vulnerability, the physical limits, all of it had to be genuinely experienced and assumed by the divine. There were no shortcuts. And according to the text, the methodology of this healing happens step by step. The therapy doesn't just spontaneously start with an adult teacher appearing out of nowhere. It actually starts in the dark, watery confines of a mother's womb for 9 months. Then, on day 8, the infant experiences the pain and bloodshed of circumcision, voluntarily submitting to human law. Next is childhood, right? Years 1 through 12, filled with obedience and physical labor, effectively curing the rebelliousness of youth. And finally, adulthood, facing down the universal passions of greed, pride, and ultimately mortality itself. By passing through every single stage of human development faultlessly, this cosmic therapy systematically healed the brokenness baked into every phase of our lives.
Section 3, Childhood Sanctified, a paradigm shift. This step-by-step healing process leads us right into how this worldview utterly transformed the way society views its most vulnerable members, kids.
Before this huge shift, the biological process of birth was often viewed by ancient philosophers as something dirty, purely functional, and frankly completely unworthy of anything divine. But the source texts argued that the Incarnation totally flipped the script. By beginning his earthly life inside the womb, the divine elevated pregnancy and childbirth. The womb wasn't just a biological mechanism anymore. It became man's first home. It became a site of absolute miracle and sanctity. When we contrast these different societal approaches to childhood throughout history, it reveals a massive divide. Look at ancient paganism. Kids were often just seen as property or small adults, and that mindset led to horrific realities, widespread child slavery, and even literal ritual sacrifice in certain ancient cultures. Now today, the modern secular approach often swings to the complete opposite extreme. It treats childhood as an artificial reservation of endless entertainment, which the sources argue actually leads to delayed adulthood, exploitation, and often masks the tragic realities of abortion. But the Christian ideal, established by this cosmic shift, sits in stark contrast to both. Childhood is incredibly sanctified and fiercely protected, sure, but it's also viewed as a purposeful path of learning virtue, doing real labor, and taking on genuine responsibility. And this highlights the practical, boots-on-the-ground impact of this cosmic therapy. On one side, we have the ancient cultural norm, a society that legally discards the weak without a second thought, like the Roman paterfamilias. But on the other side, the source material offers an unbelievable modern anecdote about a man named St. John of Shanghai. Operating in the mid-20th century, this guy would literally go into the most dangerous, rat-infested slums and trade bottles of vodka to addicts in exchange for their unwanted newborns, rescuing these infants from absolute certain death. The very existence of heroes who dedicate their lives to saving the disposable is, according to this framework, a direct result of the Incarnation fundamentally changing the baseline value of a human life.
We really can't discuss the sanctification of the family without looking at a major unsung hero, Joseph. The sources highlight him as modeling a radically different, deeply protective, and humble kind of masculinity. You know, in a world that so often equated male authority with raw dominance and power, Joseph's authority was completely rooted in silent obedience and service. He protected his family from political violence, he taught his child the inherent dignity of physical labor with a hammer and saw, and he revered the mother of his child as a sacred temple. He's presented here as the absolute ultimate blueprint for fatherhood.
Section 4. The Son of Man Destroying Hierarchies. Let's see how this cosmic therapy culminates in the total destruction of every worldly human hierarchy. Throughout the historical texts, the divine frequently refers to himself using a very specific title, the Son of Man. By adopting this incredibly humble title and voluntarily becoming as small, helpless, and dependent as any ordinary person, a profound leveling effect happened. It effectively erased all those worldly differences of race, gender, and property. I mean, think about it. If the creator of the universe walked the earth as an ordinary working-class laborer, then suddenly the peasant is of the exact same infinite value as the emperor. It is literally the ultimate equalizer of humanity.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought from the text. By taking on the absolute fullness of human nature, the pain, the fatigue, the profound sorrow, and ultimately mortality itself, the divine completely destroyed our ability to make excuses. We can't say, well, you just don't understand how hard it is to be human. If the highest power in the universe united with the absolute lowest and most vulnerable among us, establishing this inescapable standard of humility and love, well, how does that challenge the way you view the people around you today? It's a standard that demands we see the infinite worth in every single person we meet. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I will catch you in the next explainer.